So hello and welcome to meet the EEA Education Committee. Today we're excited to have Pedro Rey Biel, Associate Professor of Behavioural Economics at ESADE Business School. Thank you for joining us today, Pedro.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
So we'll just start off with a round of introductions. So could you please introduce yourself, your teaching areas of interest, and what made you want to join the Education Committee, as well as a fun fact about yourself?
Okay, so as you said, my name is Pedro Rey. I'm Associate Professor in Behavioral Economics, and that's pretty much what I teach. I recently moved, a couple of years ago, I moved from a public Spanish university to a business school, and that changed my teaching priorities a little bit. I used to teach standard undergrad microeconomic courses, and I moved into teaching more managerial economics and in particular, behavioral economics and the application of experiments into companies. And that's pretty great for me because it makes, the area of my research is very related with the area of with the area of my teaching. So and that gives me a lot of opportunities. There are many times, with MBA students in which they are starting a company, and because I'm teaching them how to conduct experiments in companies and things like that, at the end we end up doing projects together. So it's I think it's a great synergy. I joined the committee because I'm the past president of the Spanish Education Committee from the Spanish Economic Association, and I was proposed to join the European Committee, which was very exciting. In particular, because now I'm still in the Spanish Committee, but I'm not the president anymore. So I move up into the European version of it. I joined it because I think it's clear that in economics we've been teaching. I still look at some textbooks of what we're teaching nowadays, and I think there are many things that are pretty much the same as what I was taught 40 years ago, right? Which it's good in the sense that it makes us feel like, okay, this is robust. There may be some things, there may be some truth in what we are teaching, but at the same time, it's clear that economics is evolving into a much more empirical area. And I think we need to update the methods, but also the scope and the foundations of what we're teaching. So I was excited to join the conversation and to push for a renewal of the content of what we're teaching, which I think is what's happening and it's going on in many countries at the moment. And if you want me to tell a fun fact about myself,
yeah.
First, I can tell you that these beautiful pictures were painted by my 6-year-old daughter, so I'm very proud of them. But I think the real fun thing that applies to my teaching is that apart from an economist, I'm also a professional magician. So, and I've been since 30 years ago. So I perform, actually while we are talking, I'm playing with my cards, I'm practicing with my cards at the same time as we are talking, right? So I use magic tricks and the kind of techniques that you use to speak in public and to perform in front of people. I also use it in my teaching to engage students better. So there should be a course in the economics of magic or something coming up in the future.
Oh wow, that sounds great. I'd love to be in one of your lectures.
That will be fun.
And then we wanted to ask you, what do you think the value of the Education Committee is?
Mm-hmm. So I think the first point and the most important point is to share our experiences, right? I think we need to update our methods, both in terms of content and also in terms of methodologies. In terms of content, there are projects like the CORE project in the UK and many other similar things in other European countries, in which really there is an effort to update what we're teaching and to go in much more empirical and teaching tools. I think that's one of the things the committee is for, is to share experiences, to let people know what are the best practices of others, and to push a little bit for making the economics profession a little bit more relevant and more informative for students to know what they're getting into and what kind of jobs and what kind of things will they be able to learn and do in the future. And in terms of practical things, in terms of how we teach, obviously in the last few years, there's been with COVID, there's been a huge change into online teaching, which was already coming, but I think COVID has accelerated everything. And I think, for example, having sharing experiences about how to make the transition into teaching online. How can you make teaching active even if it's on videos? How to engage students better in an online world is one of the things that definitely we need to discuss better, and we need to find we need to find solutions, and we need to share those solutions so that everybody knows that we cannot be teaching the same way we were teaching a few years ago. Yeah,
sharing experience is definitely a great way to learn. And we wanted to ask you, what do you think is the biggest challenge in economics education that you see?
I think there's a huge gap, that it's narrowing, but still there's a huge gap between, well, there are two things. One is, I think many people getting into economics is not one of those things that people really know what they're getting into. It's not like becoming a medical doctor. People who have the vocation to be a doctor, they know what they're getting into. Economics is not so vocational. It's people who, well, they care about they care about public goods, they care about business, they care about things like that. They have heard about finance, but they don't. One of the best efforts we should do is really tell them what we are about and what they're going to learn and how they're going to apply it. So one thing is about entry into economics, but then I think the second challenge is to making what we teach relevant to both the public government and the business world, really relevant. I think one of the best things we could do is, apart from giving talking about social problems and how can they be solved and all these things in general, I think one of the best things we can do is teach people, go into the direction of teaching people about, policy, evidence-based policies, evaluation of the programs that we're doing, teaching the tools that they're going to need to evaluate those programs. And in particular, of course, that's a little bit, choosing the type of thing that I care about, but experimentation. I think one of the big movements right now, both in the public and in the private sector, is into, not everything is going to work. We actually need to try and test things. So how to do experiments, how to conduct a proper experiment before making an important decision, how to evaluate that experimentation. I think those are challenges that we still need to face. And of course, it's difficult to have experimentation in teaching because, of course, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of resources. But I think, having students having the experience of conducting and designing experiments while they are in many different areas would be something that we can push.
That sounds really good. And finally, we wanted to ask, what is one inspiring aspect you have observed in economics education in the last 5 years?
So I think the core project is probably the thing that inspired me most. Seeing all these professors who realized that the textbooks that they were using, they were not much different than the textbooks that they are using right now, and realizing that, hey, we need to change this thing. We need to actually have a big debate about what we can teach and how we can teach it. And I think it's showing promises. Early evaluations of how the core project is working, they show a lot of promise, and I think they are making themselves relevant. So I think the next challenge or the next inspiring thing is that this moves along all the European Union and all the countries in the European Economic Association, and not only in the countries that started the project. So I think that's also one of the next steps.
No, yeah, that's really great. We use core in our economics learning all the time. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. That's all the questions we have today for you, and you've given us some really great answers. So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.